I was walking along today in my meditation. I saw a plastic bag filled with air, and it drew my attention because it was a windy day, and the bag was flying up in the air. Then it was in the middle of the road, and a car would go by, and it would be moved from one side to the other, up and down. Most of us are like that. The slightest movement around us, and we are high as a kite, or low as the earth. And yet, you can't destroy a plastic bag that tells you there for 1,000 years. Your soul is forever. But why does it have to be moved by every air and all the hot air and all the influences of the world? Because it doesn't have roots. When you look at the Bible, uh, the roots, the church is compared to a tree. And if you know anything about trees, the extent of the root system is the extent of the branches. You look at where the branches of the tree are, and if you go right down to that, you'll see those were the roots hidden away, but they're there. And in the readings of this 40 days, one of the things that strikes you is what Jesus says all the time: don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't let your hearts be troubled. And yet we are afraid. The apostles were so afraid they closed the doors, afraid of the Jews, afraid of killing, afraid of dying, afraid of everybody, afraid of ourselves. Why? Because we don't face fear. What are we afraid of? Afraid of losing love, afraid of being loved, afraid of losing God, afraid of not being accepted, afraid of not belonging to the right crowd. We have so many fears. How do we overcome that fear? Jesus gives us the example. Spend a lot of time in prayer. Unless your faith is rooted in that truly knowing God in prayer, you're going to be blown around by the wind, and you're going to be fearful of everything, yourself included. It's like looking in the mirror and you're just frightened to death of what you see. How do you do that? You have to pray. You have to come to God. And as Jesus, why was he afraid? He was afraid. Fear made him sweat blood. So there's nothing wrong with being afraid. It's the being afraid to face the fear. That's where we fail. And we need to do that by rooting ourselves in God. Ask God to give you deep roots. So when problems come, you won't be blown around by the wind, and you'll bend but not break, and you'll produce much fruit. In the Revelation book, it talks about the tree planted by living water, producing food good for medicine and good for healing and good for food. That's what we're supposed to be, trees producing medicine. And I love the one about the tree on the vineyard. You don't put a fig tree in a vineyard, because the vineyard needs different water than than a tree does. And the thing that had to happen was that you have to dig around that tree and put manure. The manure is our sins and our failings. And God digs around with us with the same instrument that looks like a fork, but it's there to dig into us and to make us realize that we have to have fresh roots, or we won't grow. It's interesting. One of the things that struck me was they hung Jesus. Took him down from the tree of good and evil, the tree of the Garden of Eden. It's a tree, and Jesus was on the tree. He's the fruit of the tree. It doesn't seem to have any roots, yet it's deeply rooted in love. That's the root of our tree. The tree of Jesus' roots are love. We have to come to learn to love God and to love ourselves and love others. And the only way we do that is by facing ourselves in prayer.